and all your last names for nothing. Welcome, good morning. I thought we were going to start with a rather easy question. So esports has become a pillar of the entertainment industry in the digital space. I thought it would be a good way to open this up with explaining to the audience what's the core business of a team, what are the core assets of a team, how do you monetize those assets, and what are key factors for success? Maybe we start with you, Patrik.
Sure, if my microphone is working, hi everyone. Yeah, obviously the teams are extremely central, yet it's been difficult for teams historically to monetize teams, be it lack of a framework with game developers, be it getting the distribution rights for your merchandise, venues, we don't own venues, which you do in traditional sports. Sponsorships has always been there, although very focused around endemic ones, hardware brands, antivirus and whatnot, right? But I think we're seeing a huge sophistication of the market itself. So I think we see more similarities with traditional sports and sport owners, with league revenues, viewership incentives, merchandise sales that can skyrocket, and you have the ability to sell it at other people's venues, because we tend to just have more of an ATP circuit. We go around to different events in many of the games. And importantly, we're seeing an increased collaboration with game developers. I don't think today, well, we have a few exceptions, not necessary to name them, but in the most games we are engaged in now, we have a legal framework and kind of rules of engagement on how we exist or coexist in that very game. And I think that's vital, because otherwise the sports that we invest in, be it increasing player salaries, now in certain games it can be up to like $25,000 to $30,000 per month, boot camps, gaming housing, team management, physiotherapy, sports psychologists, you name it. If we don't have the kind of long-term somewhat secured, we also need to perform, we also need to do our duties and obligations, but when you don't have that, it's been challenging, and that is kind of behind us, I would say, the most conversations we have now. And I think we're looking at team owners here that are acting in multiple games, which is different to the traditional sport owners.
Can you maybe tell the audience, like, what are the games Fnatic is active in?
Sure, I mean, it's a long list, I just named a few, I think that's fair enough. So CSGO, that's the, FPS game's been around since '99 actually, although it's been transformed into a modern version. They're going to be a final this weekend actually over at Wembley. Congrats to you playing in the quarters. League of Legends, obviously mobile. Dota is another mobile. We're also in mobile games, console games. So yeah, right now it's 10 games, 11 divisions, because in one of the games we have an academy team as well.
All right. So Jason, you're operating a team in North America. Are there any differences, you think, in operating a team there? What are the core assets of your team?
Yeah, I think Patrick's answer was great and covered a lot of aspects. I think teams at the core are generally marketing vehicles, similar to traditional stick and ball sports. We market for sponsors, we market ourselves, we move our own merch, and it's always been challenging, quite frankly, to monetize a team. I think in the new era of esports with digital revenues and working alongside the developers has opened up a lot of different avenues for interesting revenue sources. Historically speaking, I think the team business has always kind of been behind the 8 ball, is the phrase we use in America. It's been pretty challenging because, to use American football, for example, no one owns the football. So you can come together, you can build a sustainable league as the NFL has done, you can monetize it quite efficiently. In esports, someone does own the football. So we're dealing with Valve for Counter-Strike as the example to use, dealing with Riot for League of Legends, dealing with Epic for the new juggernaut game Fortnite, which always kind of throws a curveball into how we can monetize our businesses. I'm a staunch believer that moving forward, the team business needs to evolve to work alongside developers to put our logos inside game and start driving large sums of digital revenue, since we traditionally don't sell seats like the NFL or NBA would, or football over here in Europe would. There's a lot of challenges moving forward, and it'll probably go on for a long time. But I think the North American business model in general is similar to the model our European brethren have, other than I think we probably have quite a bit more investment right now. Some of it being spent wisely, some of it being spent foolishly. But the integration with traditional sports franchises, I think, is going to be a very interesting trend to watch in North America. We've been blessed to receive investment from the owners of the Dallas Cowboys. There's been other groups in North America that have received similar investment. And one of the core facets of our current operations is setting up structures and infrastructures and putting processes in place to best learn from their expertise. Because they've been in competitive sports entertainment for dozens, of years. Whereas, we're 15 years old and we're a pretty old group in the esports space. So we're trying to figure out how can we come alongside them and learn from their expertise in legal and marketing and sales and entertainment. And what we've also found quite interesting is quite often they're also learning from us because we were born in the digital age, we're kind of bred in the digital age, whereas they've always been what I call analog. So it's been a very mutually beneficial partnership to date where they've learned quite a bit of things from us about just dealing with the internet world while we learn traditional marketing and other things from them. So.
Right, so you mentioned franchising. Nico, I know you have currently a very successful team in the European League of Legends Championship Series. So I'm wondering what Jason mentioned with regards to publishers governing the space. How does this actually affect your ability to build a team, and is currently operating a team affected from this transition from having a league where you had a relegation system towards a franchise where you actually, or as we like to call it in Europe, a long-term partnership? How does that actually affect the ability to build a team and to plan long-term?
So I'd say the variable of franchises in esports is really a game changer from a team perspective, because as you mentioned, in the past we used to have relegation, like in traditional European sports, and it was even harder than in traditional sports because, let's say, in English football you have 3 relegation a year in a pool of 20 teams. In League of Legends you could have twice a year 3 teams relegated from 10 teams. That meant you couldn't really build long term. You really needed to hire, let's say, big names because you couldn't take any risk. Like, you couldn't develop young people. It's super risky because if they don't perform immediately, then you are at the risk of being relegated, then you lose all potential investment, all potential sponsorship. So it was especially true for us, and it's a great example. Like, we made a lot of mistakes in hiring players because we felt pressured by the threat of relegation. And now this year we started another approach, hiring rookies and, let's say, having a long-term plan to develop them. Luckily enough, it worked even better and faster than expected since we qualified for Worlds. But it's something that we couldn't have done. We wouldn't have taken this risk. Some team might have done, but for us it was too risky because we understood that our business was at risk. So we hired big names. Sometimes it can work. For us it didn't. And now this new approach shows that franchise system is, you can really develop your brand and make long-term plans, and when you come to investment, it's really obvious, like, who would invest in a team that can lose most of his biggest asset every 6 months? It doesn't make any sense. So franchising, from our perspective, is really game-changing. It allows publishers to work with only good structure, good organization. And I think if you look at many esports, you can see that you have strong teams, teams that develop solid business, solid brand, attracted sponsors, and you have some teams that really don't work very well. The organization is not strong enough, they don't put enough resources. And in a franchise system, the publisher will select a healthy group to develop a sustainable operation in the long term. So I think franchising is great for esports. Obviously a bit surprising for European people because we don't know that. A lot of fans don't really understand how it works and are worried about competitivity. But if you look at American sports, they are competitive in a sense. You don't have teams that lose on purpose. Maybe sometimes you see tanking in NBA, but all in all, teams want to win. It's obvious from our business because the more we win, the more money we'll attract, the more fun we'll attract. I think franchising is very healthy. You know.
Can you maybe just explain to the audience, I think that would be a helpful follow-up, because not everybody might be aware how it actually works when you can sign players in esports. Is it different from esport to esport? When can you sign players? What actually goes into it? What's the contract length as well? The typical contract length. That might be quite surprising for some.
Yeah. So a few years ago, the contract, the period where you could sign players were not really regulated. So we at Vitality started on Call of Duty, and I could go to bed and wake up and learn that 2 players went away from my team. Like, if players were not happy playing with each other, they would want to change the team every day. That was awful. Then you had publishers like Riot Games that started to regulate. They just replicated what happens in traditional sport. You have a time period where you can sign transfer, and aside from that, player cannot move. There are roster logs. Riot started anti-poaching rules where you cannot speak to a player that's under contract with another organization, stuff like that. So it's obviously different from game to game depending on the publisher's stance, but we see that happening more and more regulation, and now it's really close to traditional sports. The main difference being that we usually sign short-term contracts, but that's changing, and that happened for a very simple reason. The market was growing so fast that players understood they just had to sign 1-year contract and sign way bigger contracts the year after. But now, with more and more solid organization, more and more investment coming, the players are starting to understand the value of longer-term contracts. So we're not there at the sports level where you can sign the player for 5 years, but we see more and more 2 to 3 year contracts, and in esports that long-term. And again, that's good for our business, our ecosystem. It's slowly transitioning towards something more sustainable. Because again, changing player every year and having your 5 players wanting to sign elsewhere every year is really bad for the business and the narrative that you create on that.
So, Robin, Nico just said that basically the key asset is the team, the players, and their performance. So maybe you can give us some insight from the point of Virtus.Pro. How do you take care of your players? How do you make sure that they're healthy all times? What goes into a successful player management from your organization's point of view?
Yeah, basically before joining VP, I had about more than 10 years of traditional sports experience, and this was basically one of the reasons I got hired. My firm belief is that, and this is the thing that wasn't some time ago that wasn't implemented widely, is that you can only ask the players to do their best as soon as you give them the best. So like as long as they don't have any excuses about, okay, I wasn't playing good enough because my computer wasn't fast enough, or because I don't know, like we had some quarrels in the team, so we need the help of so the climate within the team is not good. So as soon as you're able to surround them with with basically normal conditions, and one of the biggest differences between traditional sports and in esports is that, for example, if you speak about football, there are 25 people in the team and 11 of them are on the pitch. So if you have Maurer in the team and he's going crazy or like burning something in the Man City locker room, you just put him on the bench, and then you have another player, maybe young one or the veteran who wants to prove himself, or young rookie guy who wants, and then he just plays, and then you have rotation. In esports, you have a team of 5 people in most titles, and they're just there, they're playing all the time. So if one person is suffering, the whole team suffers. So this is actually a very big difference, that you don't have people on the bench. So like for us, and with our Dota 2 team, one of the best in the world right now, it's proven to be a very good thing that you give the players what they want to succeed, and then you can ask them to succeed. I mean, and it's not only about like computers, boot camps and everything, it's also about the approach. I mean, when they see the added value that the esports organization is giving them, when they see that we're passionate about their success, they would, pay back. And so yeah, I would say, and in many, like before, maybe 5-7 years ago, maybe even less, it was about, we give you salaries, you just go and win. and this is why people wanted to change teams every single day, because they're like, okay, they didn't associate themselves with the brand. This is why long-term contracts are good both in terms of sponsorship, because like when a big sponsor comes to you, he wants to be sure that he's partnering with you because you have a certain group of players that's successful, for instance, and then in a couple of months they're gone and you have a group of rookies, and he's like, why am I doing this? So on the other hand, like as soon as players realize that team is a brand not only in terms of branding, but also in terms of how we speak to them, how they feel inside the team, it basically ties them better to us in a good way, of course.
I think that's a great answer, and I think it's incredibly important because at its core, the team model, despite the title of this panel, is actually about the players and creating a sustainable ecosystem for the players. And I really think as we move forward in coming years, you're going to start to see organizations that approach player treatment making leaps and bounds ahead of some that remain in the old days. I tend to dub it what I call Esports 3.0. And it's Esports 1.0 was when players lived in their mom's basement, and they might see their teammates twice a year, generally at CPLs back in the old days, but they trained online together. Esports 2.0, arguably, in North America at least, was started in the Team House generation. We opened a Team House in 2005, and this was great because the players could be in the same place, they could communicate face to face, and the team would get better much quicker. The problem was they were always together. You go to the kitchen, there's your teammate. You go to the restroom, there's your teammate. So this would cause a lot of infighting because there was no break from your work and your personal life. What we're trying to build right now in Dallas is what I call Esports 3.0, and it's a focus on the player's entire life. In living a wholesome life. Our players have luxury apartments to where they have their own private space. Our players then go over to the Dallas Cowboys training facility where they can have a free breakfast and a free lunch alongside the Dallas Cowboys players, so the food is prepared by professional nutritionists. They have free gym membership at a brand new, really high-end gym facility, and then we're finishing construction, hopefully by the end of the year, at a brand new headquarters. So you can see, instead of living in a house with your players, you're waking up in your own space. You can go work out and get professionally prepared food, and then you can go over and practice. And after practice is over, you can go back to your own space. And it's our staunch belief that over time, treating players in a holistically better manner is going to lead to more success. And it's my opinion that investing in that infrastructure today to make sure that our players are being treated more like professional athletes than people you just kind of shove in houses. And things like that is going to be very beneficial in the long run. So I think those points are very well made.
Obviously, this is very true, and what this also points out is the thing that I also wanted to mention is that this is one of the great things about esports and also one of the challenges about esports, because we have imagine if you speak about football, think about Manchester United and I don't know, FC Red Star from Belgrade. Obviously they have different budgets, and but in esports those teams have to compete with each other on a single basis. So when basically this difference in investment is actually on one hand a very interesting thing, because obviously what Americans can do is not always what Europeans can do or what the Chinese can do. Sometimes they can do even crazier things in a good way, of course. So yeah, this is the thing that everyone should consider, is that despite the traditional sports where you have regional leagues where a team of more or less similar scale compete with each other, we have a Chinese team playing with a Russian team, playing with an English team, playing with an American team at every single tournament. So it's pretty much like tennis or golf in a way, but the teams are competing.
There's one thing I want to add, that players and the value of our brand, our company. It's very important to understand that one of our core assets is the brand itself, and you have to find a balance, because if you put too much emphasis and communication around your players, at the end of the day it's risky because players come and go. So for us, obviously it's different if you have, let's say, a 5-year contract with a player. One great example would be Reckless in Fnatic. Of course you can cater your communication around that player. Is the franchise player, you can build around this guy. It's very good and very smart to do so. But it's very important that we don't have really local fans. It's starting to change with some leagues, but we don't have local fans, and we have to create our own fan base from scratch. It's true for most teams. So we have to make sure we invest in the brand and the fans that, let's say, if I attract new fans by winning a tournament in Rainbow Six, my goal is to make sure those fans will start to follow Vitality and follow the brand, and they will think, okay, those guys are doing well, they are creating cool content, and I will follow Vitality and other games. Because if you put all your communication, all the value in the player, at some point the player will leave from another team, and then all the work you did for this fan is lost. And at the end of the day, our value is all about our brand. So it's very important to work around that and create an environment where, of course, you communicate and create content about player, but also around your brand and create some value in everything around the brand.
Yeah, so
Just gonna finally add, I mean, great answers. What we're also seeing now, maybe starting 2 years back or something, is the ability to sign team-related staff, be it a coach, a manager, or even salespeople or whatever, that have an history in esports. If you look back 5-6 years ago, you know, behind the team, I was one player myself. We didn't really have any competent team managers or coaches, because yeah, surely a lot of passion and all that, but they haven't really walked our path in life. Now we have a history of 20 years of Counter-Strike, so you have people from all kind of phases of life that can now enter or re-enter esports. Maybe they had to go to the army, or they went in school, or esport is not for me, because there was a point of time, I think now it's not still a lot of people that are making money from being a professional player, but think about it, 10 years ago it was maybe 100 people around the world, and what do they do afterwards? There's no roles, no occupations in it. Okay, you think about this game is becoming popular, let's find the best staff, and then we build from that. That's a big difference from a few years ago.
Yeah, I think that's super important to point out just quick, because a lot of times the success of an organization is based quite heavily on faces you never see. And having the right infrastructure and the right people in place, many of which have kind of earned their stripes over years and understand the DNA of operating in this nuanced business. Because esports is strange, let's be honest. Like, it's not quite like anything. It doesn't fit into any nook like any other business. So as we've had people that have come up, like Patrik himself, earning their stripes and learning the business and understanding the pulse and the DNA of the business, it's enabled an infrastructure to be built across a lot of these organizations that is quite special. I think it's very important.
So we have a question from the audience, and I think that's directed at you, Patrik. So
Sure.
I think, you know, you coming from a background as an active player, now being the Chief Gaming Officer, what goes into scouting players? How do you actually do that from an organization's perspective? What are the key characteristics you're looking for before signing a player? What goes into that process?
I mean, to answer the latter question, it depends a little bit what needs we have in the group, be it a vocal leader, obviously that kind of filters down to what we're looking for, but technically speaking, and the opportunity we have in esports is that we can access players from all around the world in real time. And esports in its nature is digital and data driven, meaning that in comparison to tennis, football, American football, it's actually so accessible that the next superstar of tomorrow is maybe someone we find sitting in Southeast Asia that has the craziest reflex or the best in-game stats, and he's just 16 years old. Let's give him that platform, right? So I think we're just kind of scratching the surface in the technical side of things with the tools we have. It's also conversation with the game developers, what data do we get access to, what not. In certain esports, talk about Clash Royale, for example, which is a newer esport, traditionally a casual game, but now we're starting to structure a competitive side of it. That kicked off with a combine event where everyone around the world could qualify into, and at that event, team owners like ourselves were interviewing the players and speaking to them. So there's not like a straightforward answer, but I think what's key in here is the data and the digital nature of esports, where we can sit at home basically and access players from all around the world. We don't need to have people flying in and whatnot. We do that as well, of course, when it comes to the latter parts of the interview and kind of recruitment process, but it kind of kicks off with just a massive network with watching live streams, VODs, the data bases that are in certain esports and whatnot.
Right, maybe Nico can also explain a bit further. What are the actual tools you're using? What are you working together with agents? Do you have in-house staff like analysts, for example, who scout in certain areas and territories in the world? What are the data tools you're actually using? In which games? Is it easier to scout than in others? Maybe you could explain that a bit.
So there's no easy answer, and I think scouting in esports is not something that's been figured out yet. Everyone is trying some initiatives. Speaking for ourselves, it's something that we're building. We're building a structure where we can have one head of scouting, and he has people in every region of the world and people for every game, because the complexity is that every game is different. You have a lot of, some games it's very easy to find the talent. Let's say a game with a ladder, or you can see where people have talent, but the real challenge to us is not to find the talent, because okay, you can find the guys, but the real challenge is to transform the guy that's playing in his basement or his bedroom to a team player. And that's where lies the real challenge, because you have that guy, let's say 16 years old, in his room, he's one of the best players in any given server, so of course he thinks very highly of himself. And if you take that guy and put him in a team environment overnight, most of the time it won't work, because he won't be used to a coach giving direction, or maybe not being the star player but playing for the other. It's like in sports, you have star player and you have players that role players, if you want to call it this way. Some people are not ready for that, they have big egos, they don't know how to live in a team environment, team house. So the real change to us is this transition period between the time when you pick up a player and the time when you put him in your professional team. And that's why many teams are developing academies. There are a lot of initiatives this way, but I think it's really where the real challenge lies. And getting back to scouting, as I said, it's not really figured out. When it comes to the data tools, you have plenty of companies starting to develop interesting tools. I don't think there is a clear leader in the space yet. Maybe someone will have a different opinion, but we're testing a lot of things right now. I think in 1 or 2 years we will have a more precise idea, and it's really game dependent. So no clear answer. We're starting something, putting the tools in place, and maybe in 1 or 2 years we can have a clear understanding of that. Yeah. But I'd say it's only the beginning of that process. And it's in sports, it's been figured out. You have scouts in every region watching amateur league. In esports, it's at the same time easier because it's digital, you can watch games online, but we don't, historically, the team didn't have the resource to have people all over the world to watch games. It's changing, so let's say in 1 or 2 years we can discuss that better and understand that part.
Just going to throw into the mix as well, we're seeing a rise in talent agents, management groups coming into the space. Surely as a team owner you might inherently, these agents are just going to blah blah blah, but for our side, or from our side and our experience, although fairly limited, it's only started 2 years ago, let's say, it's been a really good one to have a very mature conversation. It's hard for a player, especially if they, 18 or even less. How can they understand the contract duration, the salary, when does that bonus kicks in and whatnot? It just kind of streamlines that process and elevates the professionalism. Because I think we as team owners, we have an immense responsibility, because our success and the value in our companies might be great right now, some more than others, but think 20, 30 years ahead, where there are so many more esports around the world. It's a way more global thing. The world is more connected through the fiber internet or something else Google or Elon Musk comes up with, I don't know. But it's just kind of the beginning, right? So it's very important that we take ethical responsibility, and talent agents have so far for our side at least been a blessing in the sense of getting to the players, understanding them, and actually getting the conversations going. But yeah, scouting again, to emphasize it, it's something we're only seeing the beginning of as well.
Yeah, getting back to agents, I think for us it's a mixed feeling, because theoretically speaking, we need agents. As you said, players, they're young, they don't know the ins and outs of business, they would sign bad contracts. Of course, it's our responsibility as an organization to make sure we offer them good contracts, and that's what the best organizations do, of course, but you will still have a lot of bad organizations, a lot of people that don't behave properly. So we need agents to make sure the players are protected, but the issue is that the space is not regulated at all right now. You have a lot of conflicts of interest. For example, in France, we have a company that owns the talent agencies and at the same time own a team. That just doesn't work. Yeah. And a lot of other things like that. You have agents in the space right now that are not very professional. You can see that information that should be confidential is not. So we are all for agents, but we need publishers to regulate the space. It's not there yet.
I would just like a short add. Sure. I used to work really close with the National Hockey League Players Association, and I mean I really know how the structure works, how everything works, and like if you look at esports, the thing I always say, it's like traditional sports back in the 70s. So it just has to, like when a player right now when a player has a problem, he goes to the team owner. He's like, he's like, Roman, I'm not satisfied with my salary, what should I do? Like, rather than speaking to his agent, where his agent, will speak to me, it will take its time to develop, and I would very much agree with Patrik that it's our responsibility, and this is more about also how we approach the players. If they see that we take our effort to educate them and tell them, well, guys, like, we are signing a long-term contract with you, this is because blah, 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 but maybe in 2 years, this number will not be as big as, as it is right now, but we give you this, this, and this. So when they see that we are educating them, sometimes I even, if I see some in Russia or CIS region, if I see some, good agents or good groups that I believe will help players develop, I make the introduction myself, because even though it will strike me back maybe in a year or 2 years when a player is smarter during the negotiations, it's like, at the bottom line, it's always better for me, because the smarter players are, in a good way, the better for the industry it is.
Maybe another big topic coming up, I think, for the next years will be player health. So my question in regards to that is, we see actually a lot of articles about players having problems with carpal tunnel syndrome or back problems. So what do you do from an organization standpoint actually to provide a better training environment? How do you develop actually best practices in terms of defining what is actually good for a player? I could imagine, because esports is so new, that this is actually quite a wide research field to determine what's good for my player. Maybe Jason, what do you do on complexity?
Yeah, I think everyone's still trying to figure this out. We've been, once again, blessed just by kind of the group that we've partnered with. We have access to a lot of sports physicians, because in the NFL in America is quite a contact sport. So there's always a lot of medical facilities around. In addition, literally across the street from where we're building our headquarters, they're building a new, it's called Baylor Scott White. It's a new sports therapy hospital where the doctors that are being brought in are just for sports injuries, and there's actually a woman surgeon there who specializes in carpal and things like that. So we're pretty fortunate there. I think it really behooves organizations to start focusing on the long-term health of their players, not just from the human perspective, where you don't want people that are 18 to burn themselves out and be suffering these injuries, but from the business perspective, because if you can make a player's career have longevity, you're going to be able, to mutually benefit from that. So we're starting to see a lot of private trainers in the United States that specialize in the proper stretching beforehand and proper treatment, for those sorts of things. And going back to what I said earlier, I think it goes into a holistic lifestyle. We're really trying to encourage our gamers to live in a way that is conducive to success. Professional athletes train in a certain way because they have goals and they want to achieve certain things. For a long time, gamers were just known on living on, energy drinks and Doritos or whatever, and expecting to go on the stage and win millions of dollars. Today's esports, a fraction of a second can make the difference between losing or winning millions of dollars. So if we can go out and live a holistic life where you have exercise, you have proper stretching, you have proper sleeping, and things like that, to get that fraction of a second, we're going to do it. We're meeting with a furniture company in the United States to try to design the next generation of gamer chairs that perfect the spinal alignment. So when you're sitting for 6, 7, 8 hours a day sometimes, that your body and your breathing and is just set up properly. And I'm not a doctor, but I've seen some of the things that they're designing for us, and it's really looking at the gamer, the lifestyle, and just trying to make sure it's best for the player, and therefore, for the business, best for the organization in the long run.
I would just add here that we also face kind of a PR case here, because if you think about professional sports, right, where you have think about football, like English Premier League, 20 teams, 25 players per team, so you have 500 people. But every year, academies, a lot of players, they graduate from academies, and then sometimes you have a knee injury at the age of 20, and then you spend your last 8 years doing professional football, and then you're 20, you don't have any education, and you're like, what I'm doing in my life. But still, it's perceived as, it's and as soon as you do it professionally, it's not just fitness, it's hard work. And sometimes we have players who don't go on a certain level, and there are thousands and tens of thousands of them every single year, and they just don't know what to do with their life. But still, the society perceives them as as they're doing athletic activities, so it's okay. But basically, what we're seeing with esports is that people are thinking exactly what Jason was saying. That they're just nerds sitting in their chairs 24/7, drinking energy drinks. This is all I'm saying is that esports is very similar to sports. So like you have people on the top who work really hard to achieve that, and at the same time you have people who are who just gaming or who wasn't good enough to do that. But it's not anyhow different from traditional sports. It's not that in esports you have tens of thousands of people who just weren't good enough, and in traditional sports you don't have them. You have them as well, and this is very similar, and this is what we should always stress out.
Maybe just to give an example to the audience, so these top players, they do 400 movements with their hands per minute. That's more than a table tennis player, or that's more than a piano player actually does. So I'm actually wondering, in terms of training, Patrik and Flag, how long should players actually train? Do you prevent players from training longer? Is the training affected by what actually the game publisher provides them? Do they always play like a full game or train only parts? How does that actually work?
Yeah, generally speaking, we're looking at 6 to 8 hours per day, and that's probably over 5 to 6 days a week. That's during the season. During off season, we leave it way more open. We encourage the players to take time off from technology, smartphones, computers, streaming and whatnot, and enjoying life, going travel, or doing something else. Obviously it's very hard because esports, the computers, the mobile phones are so accessible, and at times there has been practice regime that even we have run that are like 10, 12 hours. You're sitting and spanning. But as we understand the space more, when we have new partners in our ownership group and coming in with different kind of expertise, and also team management is evolving, we understand that it's more about the efficiency rather than the quantity. And that means we spend a lot of time in front of a big screen talking about replays. We had a game, this went well, this didn't go well. We have mental coaching at times. I would say that's still on a kind of part-time and consultancy basis, but I predict in 2 years' time we probably have a centrally located physiotherapist, mental coach, and nutritionist as well. But yeah, we're trying to activate the players in other ways as well, because if they can have harmony outside of the field, the servers in this case, having social activities, going out for a meal and stuff like that. We're just trying to see it more of a 360-degree spin rather than get into the game, play, and see what happens. But yeah, like many other things we've been talking about today, and I kind of repeated myself, but this is stuff we're thinking about on a daily basis. We're trying to evolve, we're trying to be more smart about it. But yes, in comparison to traditional sports, let's say you're Usain Bolt, right? You cannot just do it for 8 hours a day. Technically, it doesn't just work, but in esports it actually does. But you need to kind of prevent yourself actively and taking those mature decisions that now we had 4 hours of hardcore team practice. Let's think about doing something about the tactical side or the mental side, or even, as Jason already mentioned, we're offering gym memberships to the players and encourage them and actually getting that schedule in for them that they have. We cannot drag them there, but I think us promoting a healthy lifestyle is the first good step to do.
So I got another question from the audience, and I think that's a great one for making a round here. So the audience would like to know, what's actually the biggest challenge you have faced so far as an esports organization? And I guess the answers will be quite different because, in terms of when the founding, it's like old, young, organizations. So maybe we should start with you, the dinosaur.
I am the dinosaur. And running an esports organization, team-based organization, is rarely boring. I typically have joked in the past, because most of the players have been male, that any good team is one girlfriend away from disaster. So I've had many stories of romances causing problems. I've had players stranded in Asia, and people losing passports, and all kinds of things. I could go on and on and on for hours. Interesting fires that have started in our organization, as I'm sure everyone can. It's a pretty compelling type of business.
What's the biggest challenge you've faced?
Just one that's incredibly relevant recently. A few weeks back, I had about 1 day off in the previous month, and I was looking forward to my second day off that month. I was going to wash my car when my phone started blowing up that one of our players was shot in Jacksonville. As a team owner, there's nothing that can quite prepare you for something like that. I went from going to wash my car to being on CNN and NBC in America in about 25 minutes. So there are always challenges that come up, and kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, I'm a big believer in having the right people around you, and preparing those people for all the possible contingencies. A few weeks back, one of our managers in one of our divisions accidentally leaked a roster to a member of the press who kind of tricked him. And rather than really just like being enraged with them, I sat him down and I said, okay, here, what's the thought process you went in this situation? What was the result? Okay, the next time something like this happens, I need to know I can trust you in Asia. The team hotel is booked, it's 1 a.m, we play the next day. How are you going to respond? And properly train those people in your organization to make sure they can deal, with all the nuances that come up in this business. And our player luckily was just shot, skimmed in the hand, and we've had to take steps to get him proper counseling because he was literally in the line of fire. He was next to a person that was killed, and it's a challenging world that we live in, and when you're sending dozens of people flying around the world to compete at a high level all the time, there's lots of things that do come up.
What about your vitality?
So one very obvious answer would be that it has been a challenge to stay financially afloat in the last years because there were no investors coming into space. At this point in time, it was very hard to explain what we were doing, what the potential lied. It's been changing, luckily enough. Obviously, it's different in Europe and North America, but we can say many investors, some coming from sports, some from more institutional sides, understood the potential value of the sport, investing early, especially in closed and franchise systems. So it's been very different those last years. So this changed. Another answer and one challenge that's still ongoing is really to us getting mainstream, because if I take my first market, France, every people that watch video game with no vitality, okay, it's fine, we have those young fans, a lot of them, but outside from that, getting mainstream and having normal, regular people seeing your brand is way more difficult. And it's not only our job, it's also a publisher job, because right now many esports are very difficult to watch from a viewership experience. If League of Legends being or Dota being the most obvious example, it's really impossible to watch a game and enjoy it if you're not playing the game yourself. So I think one of the big areas of improvement would be publishers that publish games that many people can watch and enjoy without playing. We can see games like what's happening with E-League in North America is interesting. They focus on Counter-Strike, Rocket League, Street Fighter. Those games are on the verge of being watchable without playing. So Rocket League maybe is the most interesting game in that regard. It's really easy to understand. You have a big balloon, cars that want to score goals. So my mother can understand in 1 minute, it's cool. And I think in the future, if we want to reach more and more audiences, it's also about publisher developing that area and publishing games that are really thought for the viewer experience.
Yeah. So, Roman, what was the biggest challenge for Virtus.Pro?
I would say generally for our markets and for us as well, one of the big challenges is the bad investments, because when you have someone who's just pouring money and doing it not in the smart way, you're facing a lot of challenges. When someone comes up and just doubles the salary of the players on the market, and you're dealing with 18, 20-year-old people, it's very hard for them to explain stability, sustainability. Those words, they just nothing to them. I want 2 times money. Look, they're paying them 2 times. Why can't you? So. And then in a year or in a few months, these people are gone, and you're just the really sustainable players on the market are left with with the aftermath. And I would say I think football experienced it as well when the money was a certain club not far away from here, when it was bought by a certain Russian gentleman. it affected the market. So yeah, I would say non-smart investment is a challenge that everyone is facing.
Yeah, I do see that.
Yeah, I think it's a fairly descriptive list of the challenges Fnatic, and I imagine any other team owner out there have had. I would add to that, remaining successful, branching out in the right games at the right time, understanding when to stop an investment. That's so challenging on a daily basis, the micro and macro decisions you need to make around this, and sometimes cutting something that you have emotionally built such a long-term connection with, but this game developer, let's say, or the way the trends of the platforms that are used or the way you watch games are changing, you need to make those sometimes hard decisions. Other than that, I think this was briefly touched upon, but it's the standardization of our industry, regulations, understanding what role and responsibility as well for that sake the team owners should have. And we are now in 10 games already mentioned, but every single game is such a different beast, so you always have to have kind of a different hat on to some degree to understand like how do we engage here, how do we attract the audience, how do we speak to the game developers, how do we even get hold of the game developers, right? So yeah, it's a bunch of a few things, but somewhere around these challenges there is also a massive opportunity that I think we all sit on if we play our cards correctly, and I think including more, exploring new regions, embracing the fact that it's borderless, what we're doing here through, the borders of esports doesn't really exist. And I think we more and more are starting to see that. Traditionally speaking, I was usually competing against Jason's team here. It was always like America versus Sweden in this case. Today, I would say that the vast majority of our teams are multinational. We have some teams with 5 different nationalities in the 5-man roster, and then you have 3 different staff members also from 3 different countries. So that's super exciting, and I think, again, the next superstars of esports, maybe not from America, Russia, or Europe. They might be from Africa, Latin America, and I think that's just amazing. I think the world can really unite around esports. There's so many platforms, so many games to play, and if we do our job correctly, I think this is just going to grow, as long as we obviously work closely with other stakeholders, the game devs, tournament organizers, and of course, players, because they're the center point of everything.
What a good closing statement. And with that, we're moving on in the program. May I ask for a round of applause for our great colleagues.